So you want to take the roll to start with, Richard or Eric?
Yeah, we have Hanairo, Urban, Bachhuber, Shaw, Potter, and Giebert. That's 6. We have a quorum. And Grace told me she'd be here, so she must just be late.
Okay, we need a motion for approval of minutes for last time for February 15th.
So moved.
Second.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion for approval and a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are approved. So the first item of business then is a Middleton manure digester. Is that correct? It's called Middleton? Okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
You want to introduce it, Eric?
I will. I think in January, the commission had asked for some more information about this digester. So I contacted Kyle Minks with Dane County Land and Water Resources. And he is here to make a presentation tailored just for us.
Oh, great.
I did mistakenly say this is located in the town of Middleton. It's really the town of Springfield, I believe.
Yep.
Other than that, I think.
Yeah, you're correct in that, Eric. We just refer to it as our Middleton digester when people are always asking, because it's the closest reference point for people around the state. Do you want me to use the PDF version that I sent you, Eric, or is it easier for me to share my screen in the PowerPoint?
It's up to you. If you want to share, you can, or I can flip slides for you.
I'll share my screen if you're okay with that. I did update. Oh, if you're able, and if I can't, that's fine too.
No, I can get you in.
Okay.
I'm just slow.
I know I sent you this presentation last week, and I say it's the newest and greatest because we just got the updated 2022 numbers for the digester. So I thought you all might be interested in that. You'll be the first to see it. So.
All right. Can you take screen share now, Kyle?
It's not letting me.
I think you got to stop sharing, Eric.
Oh, that's what it's saying. Yep, Eric, you need to stop sharing, and then I should be able to.
All right.
Yep. Now we're working.
All right.
I'll figure this out when the pandemic is over.
No worries. All right. Are you all able to see my screen okay?
Yes.
That's good.
Yep.
All right, great. So just to dive in a little bit, kind of what I'll present to you all on and just touch base on is a little bit of the background and history for our digesters. Most of the discussion will be around what we call the Middleton facility, but I'll give you a little bit of info on the Waunakee facility as well. The current operations for the facilities, how they're performing, specifically in relation to phosphorus, both on the phosphorus that they're removing at the facility, as well as a little bit of information on the land spreading, or what the end uses are for the materials that are processed at the digester. And then lastly, I'll finish up with some of our future plans. A few of you may have heard in our 2023 budget of this initiative we have for a feasibility study to investigate in community manure treatment options that might be viable for our watershed in our county. So just a little background and kind of where the idea of the digesters came about. First of all, agriculture is a major component of our county and a major driver of our economics. It's not surprising. This is a publication from UW Extension that shows just a little bit on the economic impact that agriculture has specifically for Dane County. And when you look at just the dollars, it's $3.1 million annually. So it's pretty significant, right? Eggs present in our county, and we definitely promote agriculture within our county. With that, however, it does come some challenges on the environmental side in balancing, in particular, some of our water quality. And the circles you see over here on the right is really the foundation of where community manure digesters was kicked off. It was trying to balance both the agricultural viability and sustainability, a little bit on the economics, and the feasibility, and then also that water quality protection. And the digester and both digesters were kind of that sweet spot in trying to address all three and balance all three of those goals.
Hey, Kyle.
Yes.
Hi, it's Jim here. Just
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you. Quick detail question. Do you know, is family farm defined in some fashion that's consistent, or do you know offhand?
That I do not. I apologize.
Okay, that's all right.
So this is a busy slide. You guys will definitely have it in the minutes in case you want to go back to reference it. Otherwise, we do have it on our website as well. But it just lays out a little bit of the history as far as the county's involvement on what we call community manure management. And originally kind of started back in 2008 with our community manure management feasibility study. In 2010, that was the first commissioning for our Wanakee digester. And then shortly thereafter in 2013 is when the Middleton facility or the Springfield digester came online. Since 2013, we have been doing a little bit of efforts, and especially from the period between 2014 and 2018, on looking at tools such as low disturbance manure injection, composting, and other means to manage manure. And then in 2020, we also had the commissioning of what we call the nutrient concentration system. It's an RO and ultrafiltration system on the back end at our Middleton facility to provide further treatment of manure and separate out valuable nutrients. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And then, yeah. So one thing that I want to point out just kind of at the beginning of the conversation, and most of you are probably aware of this, but there's a common misconception that anaerobic digesters remove phosphorus. And I just kind of want to lay that out at the beginning. The digesters themselves don't do anything for phosphorus, right? The principle of a digester is to collect either animal waste, food waste, put them in an anaerobic condition to generate methane or gas, in which case that gas could be captured and reused. What we refer to as our community manure digester is really this whole system that you see out here in the schematic. It goes beyond just the component of the digester. From there, the gas that comes off the digester currently is processed on site and filtered and scrubbed, and then it also is transported to our landfill to be injected into the interstate pipeline, in which case that gas is going out to the California markets for renewable natural gas. In addition, the solids that come out, or the digestate, or the material that's left over from the gas generation, goes through further processing through screw presses, filtration systems to really separate the nutrients out into different components. That I'll talk a little bit more specifically for the Middleton site in a future slide as well. But I just want to lay the foundation that a lot of people, when they think digester, they think, well, the digester removes phosphorus. And really it's all of these components at the facility that get us to that phosphorus removal and that water quality component that the county's interested in. So here's just a map showing the general locations of the two community digesters that we have in Dane County. I mentioned before, one's in Wanakee, the other one's in Middleton. There are some other digesters in the county that the county doesn't partner directly in. There's a few over towards the northwestern part, kind of over by Sun Prairie as well, that are privately owned. So just a little background on the Wanakee facility, since that's our oldest one, is that's owned by a company called Brightmark. It's located out in California, and it's operated by a company called NACE Engineers. They've been operating the facility now for about 3 years, and got a good operation going there, and made some pretty significant upgrades from the previous owner. They have 3 1.25 million gallon digester tanks that generate the methane and that they collect the manure in. And then they also have what we call an RNG offtake facility, which stands for renewable natural gas. And that's basically the collection system on site that helps collect that gas from those 3 digester tanks, cleans them, and then compresses that down to be transported on a semi-trailer to our landfill facility.
Wow.
They also have a solid separation system at this facility in which solids are removed that contains a majority of the phosphorus. And then currently we've got 5 participating farms in this facility. Originally, when the digester was built back in 2010, there was 3 participants. And in, I would say, probably the past 2 years, they picked up 2 additional participants. And this facility right now is pretty much at capacity. They don't have much, if any, more space to take on more manure. The Middleton facility is similar in I guess the basics of what I've just shared on the previous slide. This facility, however, is owned by a company called NTEC, which is actually a joint venture between Northern Biogas, who is the operator out there, as well as Faith Technologies, if you're familiar with that company. They also have 3 digester tanks that are roughly the same size and 1.25 million gallons. They all, as well, have an RNG offtake facility for the cleaning and transportation of the renewable natural gas. They have similar solid separation equipment, and that they have a screw press and a centrifuge that is used to remove the solids from the manure. And then they also have 5 participating farms at this point, and are pretty much at capacity as well, and ability to add more manure. What's kind of unique about the Middleton facility, in addition to what I listed on that side, is it has these other add-on features that we kind of learned in the first go around or wanted to try to see how that might improve operations. And that includes a 71,000 square foot solids building that you kind of oversee on the right for the solids to help in the facilitation and composting. There's a compost turner in there that's allowed to add other soil amendments or other nutrients and kind of aid in that composting process. In addition to that, it also has a 15 million gallon storage lagoon on site for the storage of the centrate and the digestate that comes out of the digester. Additional improvements that have happened within the past year and a half is that there's a complete solar microgrid out there, which is pretty unique, and we were very excited to see NTEC embark on. In essence, they are 100% carbon neutral. They put a solar grid on the back end of the meter, in essence, so that way they can generate from the solar panels all the energy they need on site. So if you go drive by there, you'll see solar arrays on the sides of the hills, on top of the buildings, to generate those power needs that they need for the equipment there. In addition to that, we also have a company called Aqua Innovations that is operating what we call our nutrient concentration system, which is a system of RO membranes, UF membranes, in essence, to separate out some of the liquid fractions once the solids are removed. And that's in this picture that you see down here at the very bottom. The jar on the far left is the raw manure that comes in, and then the jar on the far right is the clean water that is actually discharged to the surface stream there on Pheasant Branch Creek on the North Fork. So just to give you an idea of kind of how these are performing, what I have here is the performance from 2022. I apologize, Eric, I know the slides I sent you was with 21 data, but I thought you all would appreciate the updated numbers that I was able to get today. And so the Wanakee facility was able to process 64 million gallons of manure in 2022. They removed 23 tons of fiber or solids from that manure, which contains the majority of the phosphorus. And then the total pounds of phosphorus that was reduced was 113,000 pounds. For the Middleton facility, that facility in 2022 processed 41 million gallons of manure, removed 13,000 tons of fiber, as well as 118,000 pounds of phosphorus. So I know one of the questions I think, Eric, that you forwarded to me was just a little bit on kind of how the phosphorus removal works for these facilities. And so the principal tools that we have out at the Middleton facility currently is a series of screw presses that you see here in the picture that take the solids fraction out, and that contains, at a minimum, where we're at now, is 40% of the phosphorus that comes into the facility. And so the county has agreements with both the Middleton facility and the Wanakee facility that sets the minimum performance that we're looking for phosphorus removal. And right now, each facility needs to remove at least 40% of the phosphorus that comes in within a 6-month time period. January 1st, 2023, that performance is going to ratchet up to 60%. Since new owners, NTEC just kind of took over operation here probably about 1.5 years or 2 years ago. And so we gave them some time to do some plant upgrades and some needed facilities maintenance. And so starting January 1, 2023, they'll be required to remove 60%. In addition to that, we also built into some of the RNG agreements an incentive. We wanted to give them a reward for trying to remove more than 60% of the phosphorus that comes in. And so we've got in our agreements the ability to reduce, in essence, a tipping fee or a service fee that we charge for them to offtake their RNG that they generate and bring to our landfill if they're able to remove more than 80% of the phosphorus that comes in. And then along with that, that's kind of the performance that we have for each of the different digester facilities. We also have built into our lease agreements the requirement for any participating farm to apply the centrate or the liquids that are remaining and even some of the solids according to an NRCS nutrient management plan on all the project fields. So the 5 farms that we have on both sites are abiding by this land spreading requirements. What that in essence mean is that the digester nutrients and manure applied is based on a soil test phosphorus and crop uptake needs with more restrictions than what the current 590 standard has. So really these farms are required to go to a higher level performance than what the state performance standards require of them. And the goal of that is to try to draw down those phosphorus levels that are in the soil out there that these participating farms have. We know that this part of the watershed has a lot of history of livestock agriculture, a lot of history of manure applications, and in essence, a legacy buildup of phosphorus exists on a lot of the soils that are out there. And so the participants, the farms that are participating in these projects, we're trying to get those to be reduced. And then again, all fields need to still meet that PI of 6 or less. And in addition to that, all the farms that are participating in the project are not allowed to apply manure or any of the digester materials on snow or frozen ground. That's an additional restriction. And so a little bit on just kind of the future related to the feasibility study that we're starting to embark on currently is that we're really trying to find a way to kind of improve on some of the handling and transportation logistics that are around manure. We know that's a big challenge right now, and trying to find maybe a better model on how manure can be handled, both in the challenges from just the sheer volume and just the increase in I guess that transportation on roads and the times of years that we can get access to the fields. Also looking at different ways of processing the components. There's been a lot of discussion on maybe whether the nutrients that are coming on the back end should be in a liquid form or there may be a solids or pelletized form that's more like synthetic fertilizer, trying to build consistency in the nutrient concentrations in these materials to make what we kind of call a designer, right? Or a field specific nutrient recommendation. In essence, that's what we're shooting for with nutrient management plans. But can we replace synthetic fertilizers or commercial fertilizers with some of what I would call more of a farm generated or manure generated natural nutrient source? And then we're also still trying to figure out the economics around that, because right now the composting markets really aren't there at the manure scale. And so we're trying to figure out how that might work and be feasible. Also looking at different market analyses and then what type of business structure might be most beneficial, whether that's on individual farms, a co-op, privately owned, county owned. There's a lot of questions around just how you can make something like this work. So where we're at right now is we're in the project planning. We've had a few informational meetings. One was up in Wanakee. We also were at the Yahara Pride Farms Conference, if you're familiar with that farmer-led organization, to start to engage with agriculture on this topic to try to get their input and feedback. We're hoping to issue the RFP here later this spring / early summer. And then also we'll probably be putting together technical teams to review some of those proposals and having further conversations with the ag community and the farmers out there on what they might want to see for the next iteration of kind of community manure management. And so with that, I'll stop there if there's any questions or if you'd like me to go back to any specific slides.
Kyle, this is Warren. Where is the digester located in the watershed?
Which watershed?
Is it North Fork?
Yes, North Fork of Pheasant Branch.
Whereabouts is it located? Do you have a map showing where?
Yeah, I don't have one here. It's right off of Schneider Road, just north of the airport.
Okay, so are all the farms are participating in the watershed?
So the farms that are participating in the Springfield facility is, I got a list here because they just got those changed, is Ziegler Dairy, Blue Star Dairy, Henson Brothers Dairy, Endress Berry Ridge Farms, and Meyer Farms. And I know at the Wanakee facility, we have got Rips Dairy Valley, White Gold Dairy, Endress Dairy, Wagner Dairy, and Endress Berry Ridge Farms.
So do you have any idea of what percent of the watershed these farms comprise?
Yeah, I think the last number that I had, Warren, we're always trying to find that number. I would say somewhere between, I would say 7%, somewhere between probably maybe as much as 10. It's a hard number to nail down. But that's my estimate.
Is that your estimate for the Yahara watershed or the
Yes.
North Branch? Okay.
Yeah, that'd be my estimation for the Yahara, not for Pheasant Branch. I would say that's probably for the Yahara.
Oh, okay. So Pheasant Branch might be more.
Yes. Given trying to think of the farms that are up there, Warren, I would guess it might be a little bit more.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what kind of a decrease in, we know we monitor at our gating station, Airport Road, phosphorus loads, and when wondering if when digesters start up, we'll see any decrease. But I say that since they started in 2013, that's when our monitoring started in 2012. So we probably won't see any changes in the monitor or the phosphorus loads then, right? Because of the operation.
Yeah, one of the big challenges we're struggling in the water quality data that we've been collecting on the other trips, Warren, is the types of precipitation events we've been getting lately. It's been really hard to discern with the increased frequency and intensity how those compare, and whether that's potentially masking any of the on-land treatments that we have.
Well, I know in 2022, the largest load came off in the rain snow melt on March. So that was a event on frozen ground.
Right.
It probably, and that by far was the largest one during the year because we didn't have very many large events. We had that one and then one in late August, but 2/3 of the load probably came from that March runoff.
Yeah, that was yep. Yeah, the timing is the big thing too. We're seeing those storm events and not the best times of years.
So a lot of the farms aren't participating in that spreading manure on frozen ground then.
So yes, the county still does allow for the winter application of manure on frozen and snow covered ground. They do need to submit a winter manure spreading plan to our department as well as get a permit to do that.
Yeah.
I've got a couple questions. This is Jim. You showed a slide comparing the Wanakee facility to the Middleton one. You had more volume going to more volume process over 64. Yeah, more volume than Wanakee, but more phosphorus removal from the Middleton. Do you have an explanation for that?
Yeah, so good question, Jim. One of the things that we've noticed about the farm's manure that's going to the Middleton facility is it has a little bit higher phosphorus concentration than the phosphorus going at the Wanakee facility. Part of that is most likely due to the manure flushing systems that those farms have. So I believe the Wanakee facility uses a little bit more water, and so they're probably diluting a little bit of their manure compared to the Middleton facility.
Yeah,
part of that is that
the actual pounds, the load itself is still more.
Yep, and then the other thing I was going to mention there too is we're getting a little higher performance out of the Middleton on their screw press and their centrifuge than we're seeing at Wanakee at this point in time.
Okay. I got about 3 questions, but I don't want to dominate here. Let other people chime in here.
I have a question, and that is, how does the county pay for this, and are we getting a good return on our investment?
Yeah, great question, Lisa. So both of these digesters are privately owned. So the investments that the county made would have been back during the construction of both facilities. I think at that point in time, we received state funding, I think around $3 million for both of those digesters. The county has also invested, I want to say it's a little over $1 million for the nutrient concentration system as well. But otherwise, all of the operation, the maintenance has all been privately funded from the current owners of both of those facilities.
when, okay, I'll jump in again. When you talk about these target removals, Kyle, 40%, 60%, and the 80% numbers, I'm assuming that's a percent from the raw manure being generated by the animals that come to these facilities. That's only that, that's the subset we're talking about, right?
That is, it's the percent of the manure that's delivered to each of the digesters.
Yeah.
So those farms still might have solid manure that they're not sending there, or other sites. So it's only the manure that comes to each digester facility.
And so the follow-up is most of that phosphorus ends up in the solids after you've dewatered it and digested it and all that.
Yep.
And those solids, where do they go? Do they go back on the land? Do they get shot into space?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, that's always the other one we always get. Yeah, so the solids primarily, there is another company that's taking a large majority of the solids and trying to turn those into a value-added compost. He's doing that mostly off-site, where those are leaving the Yahara watershed or the Pheasant Branch watershed, and taking those to other farms throughout the area and adjacent counties. We do allow for some of the fiber to be used back on the participating farms, but again, they got to abide by those land spreading requirements that we have that say they need, which are designed to reduce the soil test phosphorus levels. So they have to put them on lower application rates than they could if it was just normal manure, if that makes sense.
So the percent removal is really the pounds that are being shipped out of the watershed. Is that fair to say?
Yes, the majority of those pounds are being shipped out. The other use of the solids is in bedding. So a few of the farms are starting to explore the use of the material for cow comfort. A lot of the farms historically have used sand, and they're starting to see the added benefit of using this product as a way to cut the cost of purchasing sand. And in essence, it stays in the cycle then, right? So if they're using it as bedding, it'd be scraped off, come back in, and then just be recycled.
All right. Last question for me. Sorry, but I've had a lot of thoughts about this over the years. Are you seeing any decrease in the soil phosphorus concentrations as time goes on? And I know that was the goal. Has that been showing up anywhere?
That's one number I don't have available to share with you. We did it about 5 years ago for the Wanakee facility. And at that time, it was a little hard to conclude because soil samples are usually pulled once every 4 years for the agronomic purposes. And so we didn't quite have a large enough sample size yet to see whether soil test levels were dropping. We are in the process of doing a county-wide kind of soil analysis. I shouldn't say county, a Yahara River wide soil analysis. I just don't have that data available right now, Jim. Sorry.
Okay. This is Warren. As far as our loads at Pheasant Branch, at the North Fork Pheasant Branch, the trend is not decreasing, it's increasing, but that's because of the 2018, 2019 loads. Yeah. If we remove those, I don't know what the trend would be. It's probably pretty level, maybe decreased.
I was going to guess on the other issue here, and Kyle, maybe you can help out. Are there more animal units in the watershed now than there were 15, 20 years ago?
Yep, that's a good question, Jim. We certainly are seeing the ag trends in Dane County to mirror very closely what we're seeing across the state and the nation. I don't know if maybe it'll be a surprise to a few of you, but we're starting to see a lot of consolidation of livestock agricultural, just not unique. It's not something we're only seeing in Dane County. It's what we're seeing across the state and the nation. There seems to be a consolidation of livestock on a certain number of farms. Some farms are also transitioning, successioning out, whether they're renting that land out or using that for other uses. And there is a larger concentration of dairy agriculture in the northern part of the Yahara River and Pheasant Branch watersheds. That's where we tend to see the milk being produced. As you move further south in the watershed, we usually see a little bit more cash grain. If you go to the west towards the driftless, it's a little more specialty and maybe diverse crops mixed in with some other types of maybe livestock or meat protein based production. So it's kind of diverse, but you're right. As far as where we're seeing the concentration of milk cows, it's the northern part of Dane County.
I'm just gonna, so Warren, one issue is that although we're getting the percent reductions, the pie is getting bigger. We got more cows
Yeah.
now than we did. So
Yeah.
still more, still a load coming off.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Kyle. That was very good. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Okay,
If you do have follow-up questions too later on, don't hesitate to send me an email. I'll be happy to answer them.
okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kyle.
You bet.
Next item of business then is road salt and de-icing. I asked this be put on the agenda a couple of months ago. Now, basically, I saw an article in the State Journal about the salt problem in the Madison area. And I thought the issues, of course, they're facing, we're also facing. And we also contribute to the problem and affects the water resources in Middleton. So I put together these slides just as talking points to help our discussion. So can you operate them, Eric?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Next one. So salt, of course, as we all know, is used for ice control on streets, parking lots, sidewalks, for public safety and commercial and for personal mobility. And road salt is usually sodium chloride, which is highly soluble and moves easily through the stormwater systems and soils into the water bodies and streams. Excessive use of salt has increased the salinity of Lake Mendota and in the groundwater aquifers. And studies have found that during snowmelt, concentrations can rise rapidly in streams to levels that are toxic to aquatic life. Next. And if you have any questions as I go through the slides, please bring them up. So I took this from Madison homepage because they had a discussion on their policy for salt usage. And essentially, our local lakes, waterways, groundwater, and soil have been absorbing virtually all of the salt spread in the city for more than 6 decades. Chloride from salt is toxic to small aquatic life and degrades the natural ecosystem of our lakes. Once salt is in our waterways, does not break down, is here to stay. And I think that's the important part. It's here to stay. So it doesn't go away. Once it's in the lake, it stays there. And once it's in the aquifers, it stays there. So the large lakes are not immune to the impact of salt. Chloride levels in Lake Mendota, Conganza, and Wabisa have been increasing for about 1 milligram per liter since 1962. In 2016, Monona, Conganza, and Wabisa had chloride levels of averaging more than 60 to 70 milligrams per liter. And chlorine levels in Mendota average around 50 milligrams per liter. Next slide.
Warren,
Yes.
can I just chime
Sure,
in?
Grace.
Because I've been measuring chloride in Strickers and Tiedemann's ponds in Middleton. So just put some numbers on that. That's about what Strickers and Tiedemann's sit at. And in the springs, they're at over 100 milligrams per liter.
In the streams and?
In the spring, Strickers
Okay.
and Tiedemann's sit at about 100 milligrams per liter.
I was wondering about that because that should be,
Yeah.
they really have been concentrating or accumulating salt for years.
Yeah.
I would have guessed it almost been higher than that.
I think so. We didn't start our measurements until April last year. And so we've gotten some under ice and we'll have some more numbers coming from this spring. So it might be higher.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, just to put a Middleton number on it.
And this again is from the homepage in Madison. So chloride levels exceeding the chronic toxicity for small aquatic life has been also observed in Dunmarsh, University Bay, and Starkwater Creek. According to PHMDC, which I'm not sure that is, local creeks and marshes are strongly affected by seasonal spikes in chloride. And some shallow groundwater has become a chloride sink, slowly releasing elevated chloride to surface waters. And Madison drinking water has also been affected. They pump 10 billion gallons a year from 22 wells. And road salt is beginning to contaminate parts of the groundwater aquifers. And salt infiltration has been observed at 5 of the 22 wells in Madison. Next slide.
That's Public Health, Madison, Dane County, Warren.
Okay, yeah. Say chloride, this is salt usage concerns in Middleton that I put together, and it could be more than that. Chloride concentrations recorded in Pheasant Branch exceed EPA chronic criteria, possibly causing toxicity to aquatic life. Annual salt from Pheasant Branch and storm sewers is contributing to the increased salinity of Lake Mendota. And city wells have elevated levels of chloride that could lead to taste and corrosive problems in residential water supplies.
Warren, are these the salt levels in Pheasant Branch? Is that from the USGS?
Now I could go to the next slide, and this is a study that Herb and I put together back in 2012 that we measured chloride levels at our gating station for about a 15-month period. And so the next slide will show those. This is a slide showing the toxicity levels for the period February of 07 through April of 08. And you could see then the spikes in concentrations in milligrams per liter, and also the EPA chronic criteria. So you'll notice that back in March, we had large spikes. And then in 08, we had in January and through April, through March. And that's our observed data we had. So that's how I come up with that idea. Next slide. And this again shows the daily and monthly salt loads expressed sodium chloride in Pheasant Branch during that period. And you can see what the loads are in tons. And the bar graph in the bottom, March and April have the largest loads. And then again in 08 is March and April. And I was surprised at the April data. That's not when snowmelt comes, but actually a lot of the higher loads or concentrations come not during runoff periods, but actually the melt after a snow melt and a small light rainfall, where we have high levels of concentrations and not much high levels of salt runoff and not much dilution from heavy runoff. So basically, we've measured about 17 during that 15-month period, 17 or 1,720 tons of salt being delivered to past the gating station, going into the conservancy, and then into the lake. Next slide. And this again is just a summary of same previous slide showing that the amount of salt that runs off, or 1,700 tons during that period. Next slide. And this is an excerpt from that report that peak concentrations of chloride during the winter usually occur during times of low flow when air temperatures warmed enough to melt snow and ice on the roads, or when a light rain was sufficient to wash salt into the storm sewers. However, overall melting or rainfall did not increase runoff enough to dilute the salt. An example of this situation occurred during February 17th to the 24th. 13 inches of snow fell on February 17th, initiating road salt applications. Runoff associated with the light rain at the beginning of the storm caused a specific conductance of 2,860 microsiemens per centimeter. So essentially what we monitor was conductance, and then there's a conversion by taking measuring the chloride loads at a given time and then making a relationship between conductance and salt loads. So next slide, please. So this is Middleton salt policy. I took an excerpt from that. Snow and ice control on roadways and public properties is an essential municipal service necessary for public safety and commercial and personal mobility. The city's goal is to keep the city's road network and municipal parking lots passable during and after periods of snow or ice accumulation at minimal cost. This can be accomplished by judicial use of mechanical and chemical means on their jurisdiction of the Public Works Department. So essentially, Middleton salt policy is arterial and collector streets, apply presently about 150 pounds per lane per mile. Has that been updated, Eric? Has that changed or not?
My understanding is that that's the default rate, you know, for a default storm. So that's the intent.
Yeah. Okay, and it's applied to significant horizontal and vertical curves, most approaches to intersections and railroad crossing, bridges, bus routes, school zones, police, EMS, and fire station access, and low volume residential streets without grade problems will not routinely be salted. I live on South Avenue and it seems like we could salt it all the time, and most of the neighborhood streets around here seem to have salt application. So I think they do a good job actually of keeping the streets clean, but I think they are applying a fair amount of salt, especially compared to Madison, which I don't think has, who uses sand most of the time, don't they, Eric? Ken?
Well, they've stopped plowing anything under 3 inches on the local streets. And yeah, they will come back then and apply sand at intersections, you know, after that 3 inches of snow has been beat into the pavement kind of.
And do they have an application rate like we see on this slide here? This 150 pounds per lane mile?
They do, and I want to say it's 100 or 150.
I think in 2008 it was 150. I don't know if they lowered it since then or not.
They are using less. I mean, they're taking kind of drastic measures, it seems like to me.
When I walk my dogs, I go on one street in Middleton, in Madison, Countryside Lane. And like you say, they don't plow a lot and they use sand on the streets. It's a lot harder walking on their streets than it is in Middleton, but they are using less salt. Next slide. This shows a map of where they apply. So the pink is the principal arterial lanes where they apply salt. And the minor ones are in green, and the orange are the collector streets. And a lot of the pink ones are actually the county applies, right, Eric?
Or the town.
The town. So like Allen Boulevard, and I think Middleton does University Avenue, but
I think we do University Avenue till just the east side of the belt line, and the county does it west of there. I think it's Aurora, if anybody knows where Aurora is. Just
M and Q are done by the town or county.
County.
Yeah. Okay, next slide. So right now, as far as I know, there's no policy or regulation on commercial and business properties where many sites use heavy salt applications for safety of pedestrians, and no policy or regulation on residential sidewalks and driveways. And presently, the city of Middleton applies about 1,200 tons per year, and that might have got updated with that new one you gave me. I didn't change this slide. I didn't. I think that's about the same though.
The numbers did not change that much.
So this is a slide shows the application of salt starting back in 2005 and 2006, and shows the salt in tons. And you notice that in 2007, 2008 was a big year with snow, and so there's a lot of salt applied. And there has been, it looks like, a decreasing trend, especially after start using brine. That looks like it's gone down considerably since then. So I think it appears like Middleton is trying to cut down on their salt usage. And the far right shows the number of miles, and it really hasn't changed that much, except it looks like an increase in 2021, 22, but otherwise it's around 70 road miles per year.
I have a question, Jim, here. Is there any way to compare the pounds of salt or, quantity of salt between brine and the solid form of salt being applied?
I don't think we've been applying brine as a, ice prevention measure in recent years. We're using it only to pre-wet the salt, the granular salt, before it gets placed, which is a good thing because it holds it in place and it makes it more effective. So it does lead to less salt use, but
You're saying the brine is sprayed on the salt as it's being dispensed?
yeah.
Yeah, it keeps it from bouncing off.
Yeah, I've noticed that we don't apply brine before storms like we used to.
Yeah, I don't think they've done that in several years. The other thing, if you look at the tons of salt used and the number of events and the length of road miles, and just do some simple math, it adds up to more than 150 pounds per lane mile. I didn't really get a good answer on that, other than there are events where, they're applying salt more than once.
But that road miles doesn't include the residential streets, probably, right?
No, that's everything, I believe, Warren.
Okay.
Little jump in the last year is due to the new GIS system and data that we're using. It was just kind of a correction. We didn't build 7 miles of road.
But since 2010, we've added on some new subdivisions. You would have thought we would have increased the miles. Maybe, I don't know when Hidden Oaks was developed, actually.
That was all mid 2000s, I think.
Yeah, so it was already existing. Yeah. Okay, if there's no more questions, next slide. This is looks at concentrations of chloride in the wells, and this kind of surprised me. So the one that's highlighted is the chloride. This is and the level found was 170 milligrams. That's milligrams per liter. And so that's higher than I would have thought. And I think the nuisance range is 250. So it seems like the natural background is 25. So it looks like we've increased the salt level in our wells considerably. And that to me indicates that we got a problem. And they highlighted the bottom part. I don't see where water softeners would contribute to that at all. I don't know why that's in there. I mean, water softener discharge to the sewer system goes through Madison Met.
The only thing I think of more is the sewers do leak at times, so they aren't totally watertight.
I suppose.
I also think it doesn't come out of the effluent.
What do you mean, Richard?
I don't think the salt comes out of the discharge from the sewer treatment plant, so it ends up in the creek, is my understanding.
Well, yeah, it goes down Badfish Creek. Badfish Creek is seeing a lot of salt, and it's going down the river. That's a big problem. I guess it is a problem. It doesn't affect us, but we're contributing to it.
Well, somebody north of us, or
yeah, Janesville, here it comes.
it contributes towards us too. So it's a folded problem.
Okay, next slide. And this is just an excerpt. I went online and did some research on that. And this is the one I found from Great Lakes, from the Finger Lakes region in New York. And it reads, the contamination of our well with road salt has cost thousands of dollars in ruined appliances and corroded pipes. This Kirk Peterson of Clear Lake told Anaerotic Watershed Institute researchers, we can't operate a dishwasher and have to replace faucets and other plumbing fixtures regularly because of corrosion caused by the salt. And I guess I wasn't aware of that salt in the system would affect the pipes in our house and appliances. That's a big deal.
Doesn't do anything good for your car either.
No, but I guess I can replace my car easier than I can all my pipes in my house. So possible causes of salt problems are salt application on streets by city and county, salt application on commercial and business properties, salt applied on residential sidewalks and driveways, infiltration of salt in the groundwater from infiltration basins. I'm not sure of that one, but where does that salt go on our infiltration basins? It runs off from these commercial sites, goes into the basins. It's got to go into the groundwater system, right?
Or come back out into the stream as base flow.
We don't have any base flow to speak of in North Fork and South Fork. A little bit, most of it's got to go into the groundwater system someplace and into the lake. So in some sense, our requirements for infiltration are probably increasing the salt problem in groundwater.
And does anybody know if, I'm thinking of a public health concern because my mother lived with us during the pandemic for a year and a half, and she is on blood pressure medication and, ate a much, much healthier diet while she lived here than she ever has in her life. But her blood pressure actually went up. And I think it might've been because she was on Lake Michigan water back in Illinois. And here, we've got the corroded, or not the corroded, but, the appliances that build up the mineral concentration. So I'm just wondering, does the extra salt in the water affect people with high blood pressure?
The salt does, so I assume it would, but I don't know.
Yeah.
There are studies in medical journals that tie drinking water salinity, which is from a number of things, and salt, of course, contributes to that, to hypertension in populations that are use that drinking water. So yes, there seems to be a connection there.
The next slide. So I just put down some possible recommendations that things we might consider. Explore the impact of reducing salt applications, rate of 150 pounds per lane mile on arterial and collector streets. Use a sand salt mix on residential streets like Madison may use. Encourage residents to use a sand salt mixture on sidewalks by making piles of sand salt mixture available like Madison does in Garner Park. Require private contractors applying salt on commercial sites be certified that they have received approved applicator training. And I think that might be a big one. Maybe we're already doing that, but I think that would be a nice requirement because I think commercial sites are probably one of the bigger culprits outside of our salting roads. Adopt ordinance requiring removal of excessive salt after ice has melted like Madison did this year. And does the next slide show that or not?
This is the change to the Madison ordinance, and there's also both full ordinances were in the packet.
Yeah, I'm not going to read that, but basically what it says is, I believe that's right, that you got 24 hours after applying salt to go back and check if it's been removed. If it's not, you have to remove the salt or else pay a fine. Was that your take on it, Eric?
Basically asking people to clean up, sweep up, and reuse the extra salt that they put down.
And the biggest, the standard answer is when you ask a commercial operator, we have a condo and we've just told them to not salt, we'll take care of our own salt. And they were very reluctant because of liability, perceived or real, I don't know. But we do our own application rates personally. But this certification process, I know Dane County has a program for SaltWise. It's not a regulatory thing, but it's a program to help educate salt applicators, commercial wise. Do you know anything about the state ordinance, Assembly Bill 61, which is would relieve applicators from liability if they got certified and if they applied in accordance with certification levels. But I don't know the status of the bill. I don't know.
I think hearings were held today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Any probably zero chance of that being passed. But
Yeah. Apparently the hearings were pretty positive. It was my colleague who testified reported that there was it was received pretty well.
I hope there's a chance for that.
Yeah, well, it's a bipartisan bill. Diane Hasselbein is one of the co-sponsors, and Alex George is co-sponsoring it. Senator Jacques is the lead.
So what would that do for Middleton?
Well, so all it would do, in my understanding, and Grace, please jump in here. I don't want to. Is that if a commercial applicator for a church or a school or a store got certified, they would not be exposed to liability if they applied the presumably lower salt levels application rates in accordance with the certification process, because they always are concerned with being, you know, litigated against if they accidents happen on their salt application areas.
So the applicator is liable, not the business?
I think anybody's liable.
Yes.
Nobody can sue anybody.
Yes, I would assume it was the business, but okay, I guess other possible recommendations determine if saltwater ordinance requiring infiltration basins is contributing to chloride concentration in wells. And I don't know how to do that, but that seemed like it would be a good idea to find out. We could do an extensive literature search to see what other cities are doing.
I think
Possible.
Allison Madison at Wisconsin Saltwise could probably help with that second bullet, Warren.
Yeah. Are you in contact with them? Are you in contact with them, Eric?
I had given Allison Madison our policy and asked her to review it. That was ahead of last month's meeting, and she couldn't do it because it was Saltwise week. It was so busy for her, and she has not gotten back to me in time for this month. So yeah, I've been talking to her. She's this is her job, I think, is to try to work through these issues. I can ask her to do that, certainly.
Okay, that's good.
I wonder if we could invite her to speak at our next meeting and ask her to make some recommendations for how to change our stormwater policy, or I'm sorry, our salt policy. And then also, I'm trying to find my own copy of the slides. She could give us an update on the legislation, and yeah, I would love to get her recommendations, because Warren, I think your recommendations are great. I would love to see Middleton improve. I think we already have been improving what we do over the years, but if we can change our ordinance to be more like Madison's, I think that would be a good idea. I think it would be great to have a presentation before council about this, and maybe Brad Hopwood, he gave a presentation to the Sustainability Committee a year or two ago about how we do our roads in the winter time. And I'd also like to see council express support for Senator Jacques' bill.
Okay.
Would it be possible to get Brad or Sean or someone to come in and discuss improvements that the city's taking over the last decade or so we know what's going on?
Yeah, I would like that. Yeah, it seems like we've got the city, and then we've got the private sector. You know, and Senator Jacques' bill will address the private sector. It's a voluntary thing. If it passes, the certification program is going to be voluntary, but we can certainly, maybe the city can require developments to use certified de-icers.
I think that'd be a good one. That sounds like that would be doable, and that might help a lot. When I walk the neighborhood with my dogs, I don't see much salt on the sidewalks at all. So I don't think residential use is a big deal. I think it's the commercial ones and probably the city spreading salt on streets. So we could, if we want it, continue to monitor or start monitoring the chloride concentrations at Pheasant Branch again, just to see what the current conditions are. Of course, the bottom ones do nothing, but if not now, when? The problem is only going to get worse. And I think that groundwater levels and water supply is a eye opener for me. That's a big deal if we have to start shutting down wells and finding different wells.
Well, I think there may be a little misunderstanding. You know, this is the range.
Yeah.
The way I understand it, there are two wells which are close to each other, and they're kind of just south of downtown here, up on the hill. You know, south of like Capitol Brewery, that are the high ones, and the rest of them are not experiencing these issues.
But isn't that water? Aren't the wells, once you pump, distributed throughout the whole system? One well pumps now, and then so even though aren't they mixed?
To some extent, yeah. I don't know what that, you know, I think Strand has a citywide model of the water system that might be able to answer some of those questions. But, you know, I think the answer is it depends on who's using water and when.
Yeah.
But to some extent, I'm sure those well supplies are localized.
Yeah, I'd like to know if that level, that 170, is that a one-time sample? Is that an average over a year, or just, you know, the highest number? What is it? You know?
It's been ticking up. It's been ticking up over the records that I found, which are few, but over the last 20 years, I want to say, it was higher than the others in that first test that I saw, and then it's been creeping up. And there is a trend up. It's not an anomaly.
I believe
it.
What surprises me about that is the location of those wells. Those wells go down into the St. Peter sandstone, and above the St. Peter sandstone, there's a confining unit, the Aquifer shale.
Yeah.
And so I'm surprised that confining unit should stop any downward movement of salt, I thought. But I guess I'm wrong. Okay, so I don't know what we should do. I guess we have some action items that we'll follow up on.
Yeah, so no formal recommendations. You're just directing me to bring back Allison Madison, perhaps Brad Hopwood, for further discussion.
Yeah.
Next month. And I would say no formal recommendations yet.
Right. Can you do a comparison of what the Madison or current policy is versus Middleton? We know something about each, or about Madison, but not. There's still some gaps, it seems like to me.
Is it even possible for a city to pass a requirement that commercial properties have to use certified applicators?
I would think the city can require that its own contractors be certified, but I don't know about anybody who's not, you know, helping the city service our own roads and sidewalks.
No, but it would be legal to require businesses to use certified applicators.
Who does the certification, Warren?
I
There
don't
is
know.
none right
You
now.
know, is there such a thing as,
Wisconsin Saltwise does a certification program. Yes. And that assembly bill is, I think, directing the DNR to set up a certification program.
okay.
Okay.
Eric, can you research the question of what are the limits of the city's ability to impose this? Like, my guess is no, we can't require it of anyone in the private sector. But maybe there is a stipulation we can put in new developments.
Mm,
I don't
Okay.
know. Yeah, I mean, that's like a typical CARP-C recommendation too, is that they work with Wisconsin Saltwise, but it is, yeah, it's a recommendation, not a requirement. So I don't know. I would guess if we could do that, Madison probably would have just done it.
Yeah, we can't be unique with this problem. Other cities have been facing this and maybe have better plans than we've got right now. So let's wait and see what happens next time after we have that presentation from Saltwise.
Okay.
Okay. Good discussion. Next item of business then is appointment member to Conservancy Land Commission. So you want to talk about that, Eric?
Yeah, briefly. If you remember when we appointed people to other committees in June, we kind of cajoled Julie Urban into doing it, and she was hopeful that she would only serve half a term. So I think that time has come, and Grace has already been involved in this conversation, and I don't want to speak for anybody here, so
It's not too much of a time robber, as we haven't had many meetings lately.
Oh, at CLC.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I looked to see when are they scheduled for next week, because there's a candidate forum that many of us maybe want to see.
Right.
But there were literally no meetings listed for this year. Has it met at all?
I think the last one was like October or September or something. So no. I'm told there's nothing to talk about. So
Well, then that makes it easy.
yeah, it does.
Have you volunteered for this, Grace?
Yes.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Grace.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. We appreciate that.
I appreciate Julie's service up until now too, of course.
Is there any more discussion on this, Eric?
No, but you guys need to nominate, vote, and appoint, I guess.
I mean, we never voted on these before, I don't think.
I think we did.
I think you do.
I'll move that we appoint Grace to be our representative on Conservancy lands.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of Grace? Aye. You got it, Grace.
Thanks, Al.
Tough campaign you ran there, Grace.
Thanks,
It's real
Grace.
squeaker.
Okay. Next one is proposed red tail ridge development and hazardous. You're doing. You want to introduce the topic, Eric?
Yeah. So this came up last month, and commission asked me to do some more legwork and come back with a recommendation. So I did do some more research. I talked with, and planning staff really kind of led the charge on this. We talked with people from the Bureau of Aeronautics. The concern that was raised was pretty much just about the wet ponds and wildlife attractants. But if you get into that circular, it talks about a whole lot more than that. And you know, I think in the big picture, this isn't really a water resources issue so much as it is a plan commission, maybe airport commission, common council kind of discussion. The other regulators have kind of deferred to the city. You know, I think in other parts of the state, the DNR would allow exceptions from standards. You know, if development came along and said that, well, we can't place a wet pond here because we're too close to the airport, the DNR would say, okay, then you no longer need to meet your water quality requirements, but that's not going to fly, no pun intended, in Middleton. You know, we're going to expect that people meet the requirements regardless. So this becomes an increased cost to the developer. And perhaps, you know, there's other negatives to it as well. So I gave you guys kind of a weak recommendation of following the expert opinions that we have, which are from the Bureau of Aeronautics. You know, I think it's Water Resources Commission's purview to make sure that we're meeting water resources standards. That's going to happen for this particular development, whether or not we're following the FAA circular's guidance. You know, one thing I don't want this to turn into is a stormwater cost or a stormwater, you know, I don't want to have this instilled in the stormwater management system maintenance agreement. I don't think it's really relevant to that. So you guys, you know, you're free to make a different recommendation or no recommendation at all, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Lisa has a question.
Thank you. Eric, could you advance to your recommendations on the next page? Okay, well, Eric, I totally appreciate all the time you had to spend researching this since the issue came up. And I appreciate the expertise of the planning staff and also the folks at DOT, but I would make a motion that we reject the two recommendations.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And now for discussion, I would just note again, the assurances, there are many assurances, at least 34, because I think this one is number 34. Middleton has selectively followed we can either follow the letter or the spirit of those assurances. And I would put this one in the spirit pile because even though, I forget his name, Mr. Menon, Eric, you might know his name, even though as the wildlife specialist on this, you know, he said that it's not mitigating to have the presence of Graber Pond. One could add all the other ponds that we have, which are within 2 miles. Lake Mendota is there. I mean, you know, wetlands, there's just so much. And if you read the packet that Eric sent on page 5 of 51 of this is the circular, it even talks about, you know, fast food restaurants, taxi cab staging areas, rental car facilities, aircraft viewing areas, public parks can produce substantial attractions for hazardous wildlife. If we give in on this one development, we're just opening the door for every other wetland or retention pond. You know, the pond in my backyard that the city needs to still do a little more work on, there's been standing water in that for the last 48 hours. So I just feel like we'd be opening up a huge can of worms unnecessarily, because there are many instances in which the city has not followed through on to the letter on what the FAA guidance is. The placement of developments near the airport alone. You know, not really compatible land uses going in very close to the airport. That right there is a big one. So I just feel like this is, we need to just put this to rest. If council independently wants to take it up, that's great, but I don't think this commission should make a recommendation to pursue a policy.
Makes sense to me.
Need to clarify, help me understand then what was being recommended on that was that we would recommend the Common Council that the Red Tail Ridge development follow FAA guidance regarding wet detention basins, period. So that would.
My motion was to reject both of these two
Yes.
recommendations.
But by following, I just want to help. I'm not disagreeing with you, Lisa. By following this, we would still require the same stormwater management targets to be met. Is that we're not relieving them of any management requirements, right? Am I reading this correctly?
Well, we still need to talk about their stormwater management plan. So this would basically be saying we're not going to require have the council require Red Tail Ridge to follow the FAA's guidance.
Right. Your motion would accomplish that.
Right.
And I'm assuming everything we've seen so far, which is preliminary but have been discussed, would not likely comply with the FAA circular guidance.
Just the existence of wet ponds would,
right?
Yeah, they would have to do something to deter wildlife.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, and I think it's kind of ludicrous to think that we would be telling the geese to beat it out of Red Tail Ridge. Why don't you go closer to the airport at Graber Pond? Or, you know, I mean, it's just,
Middleton
you
Hills.
can't ignore that there are farm fields and wetlands and other wet bodies of water that are attractants and are closer to the airport than this one will be.
I got a problem with ducks in my swimming pool.
And this same issue is I assume present for Bell Farms, right? They're in the same situation, right?
Except they don't have any wet ponds in their plan, but I mean, Misty Valley, right there, they've got the detention basin that is the wildlife attractant.
Well,
Misty Valley's not supposed to be wet either, but
yeah.
The golf course just developed a wet pond a year ago.
The golf course itself is a hazard.
Yeah.
Just when I'm out there.
Without the wet pond.
Okay, so we have a motion essentially in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So unanimous then?
So the motion is just make no recommendation, Lisa, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thanks, Eric, for doing all the background work on this. That's a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of work.
Okay, the next item of business then is Red Tail Ridge Development, revised stormwater management plan.
Yes, so I think we've got some people in the meeting here who've been waiting quite a while to talk about this. They submitted a revised plan just last Thursday, maybe, and I, of course, didn't have time to look at it. So I'm really only asking for one recommendation, but we can talk about that after Weiser makes a presentation. Wade, are you going to take over? Do you want to?
Yeah, can you allow Kate Maher to share her screen? I will start and Kate will follow up too.
Yeah, hold on. Kate, I think you should be able to.
All right, yeah, I think see. Can everyone see the screen?
It says you're sharing, but we don't see anything yet.
Hmm.
There it is.
There you go.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. As you are aware, and as Eric had alluded to, we actually have been a part of this Red Tail Ridge team since the inception, working behind the scenes with Smith Group, who presented to you last month. We've been working on the plans. They've been working on the conceptual side of the stormwater management. And now what we brought to the city and what we submitted to Eric is a more robust and final, hopefully nearing final product for stormwater management. The Kate, if you want to go to the next slide.
Yep.
So this project was brought before you, I believe it was August of 2022 at a concept level. And again, then last month. The focus last month was on the offsite stay on. Tonight, we're going to give you a quick overview of everything and then dive into the details of how we've refined the design and have provided compliance with the regulations. Project, again, location is in between High Road and Pheasant Branch, north side of Middleton, highlighted on your screen, just to give everybody a general overview. Next slide, Kate. So this is the plan, the GDP plan, if you will, the colored version showing the product type that's out here, the development as a whole, and general stormwater management feature locations that have always been presented as part of the project here. The goals for the project were 100% infiltration stay on, spreading out infiltration, making sure in comments that we received that we do a thorough analysis of soils and proper locations for the infiltrating devices. And again, last month's meeting was focused on the offsite stay on that we are utilizing to help us get to the 100% infiltration stay on. Next slide, Kate. So this provides you kind of an update to something you haven't seen before until tonight. So the graphic on the left is kind of our overall mass grading plan. It incorporates a lot of the information we've gathered through the process and a lot of the detailed analysis, putting a model to a piece of paper, putting it to a plan to show space needs, sizing, locations, all of that kind of good stuff. The graphic on your right kind of shows the different land use types that we've assigned to the model and how we're meeting the goals. I think a couple things I want to highlight as Kate then dives into the details. One of the comments that Eric had provided us, and we spent a lot of time studying, is the infiltration components of the very two southernmost ponds. One in the southwest corner right along High Road there, the one that captures the offsite stay on, and the other in a subsequent phase on the very south part of the property that was previously located more easterly than what we've graphically shown. So what we've done is we've done a significant number of additional test pits out here. The product of those test pits were to reconfigure how we approach infiltration in that regional basin along High Road. And on the south side, the big change is that we moved the actual facility from its previous location in a concern for modeling soils and redox conditions and groundwater to a location that has resulted in the loss of developable space, but we feel it's a better location for infiltration. The other main highlight that I'd like to point out is on the north end of the project. The stormwater basin in that location has grown in size as we dial in this design. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Kate to go over some of the technical parts of compliance.
All right, so I'll start by breaking down the site. And so it kind of breaks into three major watersheds. So the northeast part of the site all kind of crosses under Pheasant Branch Road under three separate culverts. And then there's the wetland to the south portion of the site. That's the second part watershed. And then the third watershed to the west along the High Road right of way. So the western and southern watershed kind of converge to the south of property, and then ultimately are kind of conveyed under Pheasant Branch Road as well. And all three watersheds meet on the east side of Pheasant Branch Road. So the proposed design continues these existing discharge locations, and our three major goals for the design or to maintain the pre-development peak runoff rates, provide that 80% reduction to total suspended solids, and provide the 100% stay on we discussed earlier. So starting with that peak discharge, the majority of the peak runoff rates are maintained for the pre-development values. There's a few small events for the South Wetland watershed and the Culvert 1 and 2 watershed that have an increase of peak rates. And these are from areas that are not captured by basins. And as Wade was kind of saying, these basins moved and there's some limitations due to the grading and the elevations of the basins to get out of that groundwater area that we'll discuss more with soils later. But the majority of the peak rates are maintained. There's just some small increases for smaller events. Total suspended solids are all met. Over 80% of the proposed new development TSS are moved within the wet ponds, bioretention basins, and infiltration basins. And the infiltration basins are required to have 60% pre-treatment for the residential developments, and those are all met with the wet ponds and bioretention basins upstream of those infiltration basins. And then as we discussed previously, the use of runoff rate from that western northwest watershed offsite area was used for infiltration to meet that 100% stay on. And this graphic kind of shows the infiltration provided within each basin's watershed. So as you can see, it's spread out across the site. And as the preliminary plan showed, there were also some narrower infiltration facilities along the Bellefontaine right-of-way road. But those have been removed because they did not provide very much infiltration. They had a lot of other complicated issues. There was issues with storm sewer depth to those basins and also access to the townhome developments adjacent to it. So due to the logistics and just the really small amount of infiltration we were getting from those facilities, we still have really spread out across the site, just not those anymore. But the majority of the other basins that were in the preliminary plan are still in the site.
Kate, I have a question, is Warren.
Yep.
You talk about 100% stay on. That's based on an average year of 2000. I can't remember what year is used.
Yeah, that's the average annual storm.
So it's based on a year runoff, which is an average year. So when we have a year above average, we're going to have extra runoff, right?
Yep.
And where is that going to go? Into
So
the
that
storm
goes,
sewers?
Yeah. So back to this major watershed, that would go across in this northeast area. That's going to go to the Pheasant Branch, kind of tributary over here. They all go to the Pheasant Branch Creek.
So during periods of above average runoff, we're going to have increased volume of runoff.
Yeah. But that's, okay. That's true with most sites that are developed.
I have another question related to that. How is the average determined? Is it like a recent average, now that we're seeing the effects of climate change, or is it a historical average?
It's a specific year.
It's 1981, Lisa.
Yeah, it's not a typical year for right now.
No, not at all.
No, county might have to rethink that at some point. But
I was going to ask, where does the 1981 year come from? Is that
DNR does and analyzed these back a decade or two ago and did a analysis of local rain gauges, and there's 6 districts in the state. Each district has a set rain year that represents the quote unquote typical rain year. And I agree, it's no longer typical, but that's what it is on the books. And that's what regulations require at this point in time. Wow. The largest storm in that year was about a 2.5-inch rainfall from that particular set of data for the Madison area.
So that's really what controls it. It's not necessarily the full year. It's that large storm or preceding or after storm.
The back-to-back type storms, the back-to-back can cause problems. And then, like you said, Warren, the largest rainfall is what kind of drives the sizing of these things.
And I think the biggest rainfall within the wind slam modeling is about a 1 to 2 year event.
Yeah.
Is the largest rainfall event in there.
Yeah, about a 2-year event. 2-year 24. So that, but I mean, everybody, you know, we said this before, larger storms will discharge more runoff than what currently leaves these areas under a post-development condition.
Yeah, so back when that was done, some of us would like to have made the stiffer requirements, but we were resisted by the local the state government. The legislature basically prohibited us to go to anything, any higher standards. So if you're concerned about that, you really have to look at the legislature on it.
But we could use a different year in our ordinance.
No, you
We
can't.
couldn't.
I think so. No, I guarantee you that that you will be stopped on that.
Yeah, Dane County tried to raise the bar, and developers got a hold of their representatives in the state, and law was passed.
The retribution was quick too. I remember it very well.
Yeah.
Well, USGS did the study for DNR, and I think DNR asked USGS to look at it again a couple of years ago, and they did. And I think they came up with more recent ones weren't all that much different.
So one last question, and then we'll go back to the presentation. But on this subject, we can't require them to meet a different standard, a different year, but can we require more than 100% infiltration or maintaining more than 100% on site?
The requirement is 90%.
Right.
And when they came before us with, I'll call it a concept plan, I'm not sure what it was titled, a year ago, this commission recommended that 100%. And, can we require that? Maybe not, except that the way the zoning was run here, they're doing this as a planned development district. So that kind of gives us the opportunity to ask for more, which we did, and they're providing more. So I'm not trying to minimize anybody's concerns. I'm just reminding you of the history here.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kate.
Yeah. So another part of that initial meeting was getting preliminary soil investigations for the site. So that was completed, and the preliminary stormwater plan was using those test pits. However, there were some concerns about the infiltration rates for the basins in the southeast and the southwest corners of the site, given the test pits. So as Wade talked about earlier, we did get some additional test pits, and we moved the southeast one. So this is the southeast original plan for the infiltration basin, and the test pits in those areas showed higher groundwater and moist soils and redox features. So what we did was we removed those developable lots to the west and moved the infiltration facility over there, and we raised the basin so that it was out of the groundwater and moist soils, so that it had a better chance of infiltration.
Kate?
Yep.
Question from Jim. So on this graphic here, I was going to ask you this on some other slides. The land we see to the east of those proposed basins and down to your south boundary, has a channel running through it. That's basically going to be left undeveloped. Is that the proposal?
Yep.
It'll be a wetland.
Yep. So this area to the, below this green line is all wetland.
Yep.
So everything below there is not going to be developed, and then this area above that as well. There's going to be some paths, as far as my understanding. But unless Wade wants to jump in and say there's something else.
I think the key here is the south is limited by the wetland delineation, and you can see the easement line to the north where ATC is. So right now, we don't have a specific plan. We may, again, use that as an amenity space as part of our SIP, but right now it is not planned for development.
Thank you.
And then a similar issue with the test pits in the initial infiltration facility in the southwest. So this is along High Road in the southwest of the site. The test pits here were showing no groundwater, but just redox and moist soils. And so there was concerns about the actual potential for infiltration in these areas. So we took additional test pits and also moved the basins to the east. And the test pits in these areas showed, in this south one, there was no groundwater or moist soils. And if this north one, we did talk with the geotechnical engineer and there were moist soils, but given then how deep the test pits were and there was no indication of groundwater, it's presumed that it's just from infiltrating or perched water, so it doesn't actually impact the infiltration potential of that facility. So yeah, if you guys have any other questions, let me know.
Yeah, and I'll just close. In closing, I think from our perspective, this will be kind of our third trip to Water Resources as part of this development with the team. So if there was anything we could lobby for, we're hoping to continue to push this forward, move the project ahead, and work with Eric and staff to finalize this report. But we're hoping that we provided sufficient data for you to hopefully make a motion to kick us into that final level for us to get this through. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you. One question I have is for the discharge and from these ponds and the stormwater conveyance. They're going to go into that drainage way that runs in the bottom of the development across Pheasant Branch Road into the Conservancy. Is that where the discharge point's going to be?
Yep.
Is that extra water that was going to go down there is that conveyance going to be able to handle the increased flow, and you have a responsibility for improving that to handle the flow?
So for the 1 to 200 year events, there's no peak rate additional flow. It's just for those larger events, there might be volume, but the rate of it is not going to be increased. So there shouldn't be concerns for the 200 year, up to the 200 year event additional.
I think the question is perhaps creating a concentrated flow where before there was none.
Yeah, and I think
what you're saying.
I think that's something that we will look into a little bit more. I can tell you the Southwest Basin is discharging to what is a rural section currently of High Road where it goes south. The Southeast Basin is discharging to that large open space and the wetland. So we have ways to control that discharge and spread out that concentrated flow. So those two major basins where everything gets out of, one is discharging to right of way, if you will, and the other is discharging to basically the water resource that's adjacent to us.
And I'll also add that before they cross under Pheasant Branch, if like under the surface water data viewer, there is an unnamed tributary. So there is already concentrated flow going under Pheasant Branch in those areas that water is discharging to.
Right, but you're going to be increasing the flow in that watershed.
Not the flow, Warren, but the length of time that flow discharges will be increased.
Yeah, the volume, not the flow.
Right.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, we're going to have more flow more often in that channel.
Right.
Right now it's a wetland, right? And it just discharges infrequently.
Yeah.
There's a channel back there now, Warren, I believe.
Yeah.
That was formed. My question is, all the calcs that you've done so far showing the pollution and the volume and the rates, those all yet have to go to the county for their review to check calculations and all that? Is that true?
Yeah, there's a final step here, Jim, right? We got this information to Eric Thursday of last week. We feel it's robust at this point, that we're ready for that final check, but yes, that still needs to happen.
The county still needs to, yeah, okay.
So what percent is going to be impervious area in this development? Like 50%?
So here's can you see the screen with the land uses? So within the new developed area, there's about 54.88 of the developed area.
Will now be impervious. That wasn't impervious before.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So about 46%.
That's overall, that's the whole watershed, the whole development.
Yep, that's the whole, all the developed area.
So presently, and my concern is again, back to increased volume of runoff we're going to have. Presently, evapotranspiration takes 2/3 of that water is lost to evapotranspiration. Once you make it impervious, that loss is no longer there. So it's going to be runoff. And you really aren't necessarily accounting for that in your infiltration. So we're going to get a lot more runoff. Maybe it'll infiltrate. But my guess is just we're going to have increased flow like we found already on the South Fork.
So as part of this, so the infiltration stay on volumes that we're trying to meet is based on the city of Middleton's pre-development curve numbers,
right?
Which are set at values lower than potentially they actually are at the site. Right now it's a agricultural field, and so the actual curve number might be higher than the city of Middleton's standard.
Right.
So that might account for some of that difference, but.
Well, the loss of ET is a big one. And we don't take that into account in our ordinance. So, but also we have frozen ground. So your infiltration is not going to work during frozen ground. So we're going to have a lot more runoff. Maybe not peak flows, but the volume of runoff going into the wetland area into the conservatory is going to increase.
Volume of runoff for storms above the biggest storm in the wind slam model.
Pardon, Jim, I didn't understand what you said.
Volumes of greater than the rainfalls in that file that gets used for the modeling, yes, will increase. But you're right, Warren. I mean, wind slam doesn't account for ET, and neither does our ordinance, and those are the rules that we have in place, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2/3 of the precipitation is lost to ET, and we don't take that into account. Okay, are there any more questions?
I have a question. I was just wondering, so one of the recommendations back in 2022 is not to rely solely on the downstream basins. And I'm wondering, can you describe how you're achieving that? I mean, I see a variety of different infiltration basins throughout the development. And I'm wondering, is that how you're following through on the commission's recommendation, or are there other things? I know like in Bell Farm, they talked about impervious or permeable pavement or green roofs or rain barrels. So are those parts of your plan, not your plan, you know, quote unquote plan, but are those other ways that you can help get to a little more than the 100% that the commission's concerned about?
This site is mostly using, to help meet that infiltration rate, we're doing just these local bioretention basins that are within individual watersheds to help spread that out across the site, as well as deep tilling at certain areas of the site to help increase the infiltration within the soils. So in these open space areas that are going to be compacted, those will be deep tilled, and as well as a single family, which are these purple color ones, and the cottage condos, which are the blue colors. We're going to have a soil mitigation plan. But mostly these infiltration is going to be occurring within these facilities, bioretention basins spread out across the site.
Okay. Can you zoom in on this plan that's showing percentages, right?
Yes.
Can you kind of do a virtual walkthrough here of which component is getting how much And this, so A2 says 12.6%. You're saying that's 12.6% of the 100 for the whole site, right?
Yes, of the volume that's being, of the volume stay on within the site, within the watershed for this basin, 12.6% is happening in this watershed. So that includes within the green areas, like in the grass that's staying on, and the infiltration that's occurring within the facility.
Okay.
So in these open green space areas, this 1.8% is a stay on within this watershed that's the back of these lots and this green space. 1.8% of the whole entire site's stay on is within this watershed.
And the ponds at the south end. Are we adding up to 100 here? It seems, just visually a little shy.
When I added them earlier, they did add up to 100.
Okay. So
I did double check that.
Members of the commission, this is kind of the one recommendation I asked for was, do you feel that the practices have been distributed effectively? Now, this is the first time I've seen this data, but it's something I asked them to prepare to show you.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that, Eric. I mean, given the layout, the streets, the lots, everything else, how do you?
You got to look at the calcs. Yeah.
Well, if you want to defer until we have more time to review.
I think that makes sense. Let you review it first, Eric, and come back to us.
Yeah.
I mean, you only got this Thursday. Today's Wednesday. That's,
Well, I didn't get this until tonight.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
And you haven't got it reviewed yet? Come on.
I had a question about, I think it was the Friends of Pheasant Branch had submitted comments and they were really advocating for low impact development. And I think one of the, I may be mistaken, I see Herb Garn is on, so maybe he remembers, but I think one of the suggestions was to do something like sidewalks only on one side of the street to increase the amount of pervious surfaces. Is that considered in here? It's hard to tell just from this image.
I think as far as, impervious surfaces of that nature for the model itself, the sidewalks are planned for each side of the street, so that we accomplish the goals of the stormwater with the most impervious that it could be. I think that is noteworthy and something we can certainly look into further, talk to the developer and dial in at SIP level for sure.
I've got a feeling you're going to bump up against some zoning issues if you start doing some of those practices. It's going to take some zoning changes though, or variances.
Well, we'll see what the new zoning code looks like.
I'd be all in favor of that.
Yeah. And then, I'm just thinking of like small, but potentially significant things like for individual homes, throw in a rain barrel. I know I would have a rain barrel if it had come attached to my house already, but since it's something I got to go get, and bring here and install it, I did the rain gardens instead, but I'm just trying to think of ways to reduce the impact of stormwater leaving this site.
Right now, there are no deed restriction proposals for developers. Is that correct? As far as routing storm downspouts to impervious areas and things like that?
No, and I'm not envisioning this as, a city requirement so much as a perk for people who choose to build their homes in here.
Right. I mean, there are developments that have restrictions like that for when the lots get built.
Yeah.
So that's not out of the question.
Well, this is Warren. I like more infiltration, but sidewalks on just one side of the street doesn't make any sense to me. Where are kids going to play, right on the street then? Because I've seen that one neighborhood I walk through, it only has sidewalks on one side, and the kids are playing on the street, which is not safe.
Yeah.
I think kids belong on the sidewalk, not the streets for playing.
That's what we did as a kid. Man.
Tough for kids.
I don't see kids playing on the sidewalk. I see them playing in their yards and in the park. But and also, you know, down the street in the cul-de-sac.
I walk by parking Meadows and no kids play in the park anymore.
Maybe if we take away their sidewalks,
yeah, we'll get in the park. Walk to a park.
Parents are afraid to leave their kids.
No, I think kids will play in this park. I live in the neighborhood south of here, and I can tell you that people are very excited at the prospect of having another couple of parks to take their kids to.
Okay, so any more discussion, Eric, or are you going to review it and come back next time for?
Yeah, I think we need to.
Do you need a motion on that?
The motion is we're not going to, despite what I know what the presenters would like to see, to make us agree in concept and just have Eric work out the details with the county. But that's not what we're.
No, we're asking Eric to come back and fill us in on his comments.
Right.
Right. Well, I have one more question. Is this going to be phased in over a 10-year period? Is that right?
Right now, there's 4 or 5 different phases, and the time period is just market driven, basically.
So each phase will meet the requirements then?
Yeah, so the first phase and the focus of our final plat will be kind of that westerly 40 acres.
Yeah.
And yes, each phase will be compliant.
Okay. Okay, so I guess we don't need anything then, Eric, right?
No, I think somebody should make a motion to not accept my recommendation. Or I guess I didn't make a recommendation. I asked you to.
Getting a little late here.
Yeah, so we're coming back next month.
I would move that we consider a recommendation from Eric at our April meeting.
Second.
Any more discussion on that? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the motion's carried. Okay, thanks for the presentation.
Okay.
The last item of business then is any suggestions for our next meeting? And I guess we already have a couple with road salt and then Eric coming back with the red tail recommendation. One thing I thought of, Eric, and I'm working on the summary of water quality and flow data for 2022. And so if we have time, I'll make a presentation on that.
Okay.
And also, can we have a status sometime, a brief discussion of where we stand on Pheasant Branch as far as the what they're doing on bridges and other restoration work from the 2018 flood? Is that ongoing now?
The stream bank restoration is done. I think they'll have to come back in the spring and do some punch list items. The bridges, I can easily summarize that for you next month.
Or else wait till the spring and maybe show a couple pictures of the restoration work that took place.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I could compile that too. I mean, pictures from the fall, but if you want to wait.
Yeah, well, so most of the work was done in the fall then. If you already had pictures, that'd be great.
The stream bank, it was bid in 3 different contracts, Warren. 2 of them were for stream bank work, and those both got finished just barely before the end of the year. And maybe in late November, the contractor who's redoing the bridges and will eventually repave the trails, they came in behind that first contractor and started working. Mark Wegner sends out updates periodically, so it won't be I can summarize that relatively easily.
Okay, great. And the FEMA funding come through already for that then?
Oh, no. We're not out of the woods on that yet.
That's what I was wondering. I didn't think we were going to start until FEMA funded it.
Isn't FEMA funding an oxymoron?
No, we made it through their environmental assessment process, and they, I guess after pulling the rug out from under us a couple of times, essentially said they would fund it. Now we have to seek reimbursement and find out everything we did wrong.
They would fund it, but they didn't tell you the amount.
Right. It is hopefully in the next few months that starts happening.
Okay.
I wonder if not next month, because we already have enough on the agenda for that month, but we had talked a few months ago about fees in lieu of for stormwater. And are we really making the most use of the funding that's collected? Are we charging the right amounts? And it seemed that there was interest in other commissioners and exploring this and, just finding out where we stand on the issue of fees in lieu of. I think I had asked the question, what do we use that funding for? And we couldn't recall an instance of using that funding.
Well, we've used it in the past for a number of different projects, and we're sort of waiting. We have been waiting for a project on the North Fork, but that hasn't happened. But we do have money in there that could be used for building flood detention facilities. But I think you're right, Lisa, looking, are we charging enough? I think some developments are getting by a lot easier than if they had to meet our requirement. Mm-hmm. Especially since they don't have to do a maintenance check every couple of years.
Yeah, so maybe in May or June, we could talk about that.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I think what I might have brought up the last time was that I believe the county is now looking at a fee in lieu program. So we could look at the numbers that they come up with, perhaps, rather than launching into another study of how much it costs to, what is the fee in lieu value for the increment unit cost? How about that?
That sounds good. Lisa, in your talks with the towns on the North Fork, we do have that fees in lieu of money that could be used for some construction on the North Fork.
Okay. Yeah, that work is waiting until after the election. Little work group has not gotten off the ground because we're waiting for the election to be over.
Okay. Okay, if not, and nothing else, then the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah.